The silence in the penthouse. The morning light crept through the enormous glass windows of the Wyatt penthouse in downtown Seattle, falling in pale gold slants across a room that looked beautiful but felt lifeless. Polished marble floors reflected the light like water. A leather sofa sat untouched, cushions perfectly arranged, and a row of tall plants lined the window wall. Everything in the home looked designed, arranged, and carefully bought, but none of it felt alive anymore. In the middle of the vast living room, Daniel Wyatt sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring blankly at the city skyline that stretched beyond the glass. He had built this home for his family, his wife Emily, and their little girl Lily, but now it was nothing more than a quiet cage filled with memories that hurt too much to touch. The faint sound of a clock ticking was the only noise that dared break the silence. On the thick Persian rug near Daniel's feet, Lily sat curled up in her pajamas, her small arms wrapped tightly around a faded brown teddy bear. The bear's fur was matted, one ear drooping lower than the other, the stitches coming undone near its paw, but Lily held it like it was her anchor. Her hair, a tangled mess of chestnut strands, fell over half her pale face. Her eyes, once full of curiosity and life, now stared dully out the window as though searching for something far away, something beyond reach. She had not spoken a single word in over a year. The silence was not just in her voice, but in her entire being. No laughter, no complaints, no questions, no singing at bedtime, no silly jokes over pancakes. She was present in body, but in every way that mattered, she had withdrawn. And Daniel, for all his wealth, power, and resources, could do nothing to pull her back. The accident had stolen more than his wife. It had taken his daughter's spirit. A rainy night, a truck had swerved. Emily's scream cut short. The world that had once felt secure collapsed in seconds, leaving Daniel and Lily with scars that medicine could not heal. Daniel had thrown himself into solutions, spending endless money and energy. He had flown Lily to the best pediatric specialists in Boston, then San Francisco. He had hired therapists who charged as much for 1 hour as most people earned in a week. He had filled their schedules with acupuncture, music therapy, art therapy, meditation retreats, even experimental treatments recommended by desperate forums. He had tried everything, and still, silence. Each evening he would return from yet another failed appointment and find Lily exactly the same, sitting with her teddy, staring at nothing, her little hands limp in her lap. Each time his heart broke anew, and each time the crushing thought came, maybe she will never come back. Just 2 weeks ago, a child psychologist had said something that clung to him like a shadow. "Mr. Wyatt, perhaps Lily doesn't need another technique. Perhaps she doesn't need fixing. Perhaps what she needs is a reason to reconnect with the world again." A reason. Daniel had built billion-dollar companies out of code and algorithms, systems where every input produced a measurable output. A reason was not something he could purchase, measure, or program. He could give his daughter the world, but he could not buy her a reason to want it. That truth was a knife he could not pull out. His phone vibrated on the coffee table. For a long moment he ignored it, afraid of breaking the fragile quiet. But then the screen lit up, and he saw the name, Jason Cole. Jason was more than his business partner. He had been Daniel's closest friend since college, the man who had co-founded North Star AI with him in a garage 15 years ago. Jason was persistent, loyal, and relentless in making sure Neil did not completely drown in grief. The message was short. "Meet me at Pine Cafe around noon. Update on Tokyo deal." Daniel stared at the words. In another life, the Tokyo deal would have thrilled him. It was a major contract, the kind of deal that could take North Star into new markets. But right now, none of it seemed to matter. He had avoided meetings for months, hiding from investors, avoiding boardrooms, skipping dinners, and letting Jason carry more than his share of the weight. He hardly left the penthouse anymore. He didn't want to leave Lily alone. He didn't want to face the world that had stolen everything from him. He looked at her now. She was still hugging the teddy, still staring at nothing, a fragile little ghost of the bright, curious child she once was. His chest tightened painfully. "Sweetheart, Daniel said softly, his voice rough with the effort of speaking after so much silence between them. "How about we go out for a bit today?" No answer, no movement, only the slow rise and fall of her chest. For a second he thought she had not heard him, or worse, that she didn't care. His heart sank. Then, slowly, Lily shifted. She uncurled her small body, stood on shaky legs, and looked at him. Her eyes were not bright, not animated, but she lifted her tiny hand and held it out to him. A small gesture, almost nothing, but to Daniel it was everything. A sliver of hope, thin as a hair, fragile as glass, but real. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing back tears. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's go." For the first time in months, he saw Lily give the faintest nod. The drive to Pine Cafe felt both familiar and surreal. The streets of Seattle rolled past, wet from the morning drizzle. The tall buildings with their glass facades reflected a city that bustled with life. People rushing to work, buses groaning at stops, cyclists weaving between cars. Daniel gripped the wheel, glancing often in the rearview mirror. Lily sat in the back seat, Eddie Bear in her lap, eyes half hidden under her messy hair. She did not speak, but something was different. Her gaze was not as hollow as it had been. It was as though a tiny crack had appeared in the wall she had built around herself. Daniel allowed himself to breathe a little easier. It wasn't much, but it was something. Pine Cafe was tucked into a corner of North Seattle, a place Daniel knew well. Years ago, before success had changed everything, he and Jason had met here countless times, scribbling ideas on napkins, sketching algorithms on cheap notebooks, dreaming about changing the world. The cafe had always been a mix of old and new, red brick walls, vintage lamps, small wooden tables, yet filled with the buzz of laptops and young professionals chasing their own big ideas. The smell of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries always wrapped the place in warmth. That afternoon, the cafe was alive with its usual rhythm. The espresso machine hummed, steam hissed, mugs clinked against saucers. Customers typed on keyboards, whispered in low voices, or laughed softly over croissants. Outside, the drizzle tapped on the windows like impatient fingers. Daniel stepped in, holding Lily's hand tightly, afraid that if he let go, she might retreat back into herself. Jason was already by the window, waving with his usual easy smile. "Hey," Jason greeted, standing up. His eyes softened when he saw Lily. "Hey, Lily. Long time no see." Lily pressed closer to her father, her face half hidden. She didn't respond. Jason looked at Daniel with quiet sympathy, but didn't push. They all sat down, and Jason launched into updates. Contracts, investors, deadlines, Tokyo negotiations. Daniel nodded, took notes mechanically, but his attention never really left his daughter. Lily's small face was turned toward the cafe's counter, her expression unreadable. Her teddy was pressed against her chest like a shield. Daniel's heart ached. Would she ever laugh again? Would she ever say "Daddy" again? Then, something unexpected happened. From the open kitchen, a young woman emerged. She carried a tray of warm pastries, her apron dusted with flour. Her skin was a deep glowing brown, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, her eyes bright but calm. She smiled warmly as she walked through the cafe, placing pastries on the display shelf, greeting familiar customers with nods. When her gaze fell on Lily, she paused. Her smile softened, and for a moment she tilted her head as though she could sense something others had missed. There was no pity in her eyes, no curiosity, just an instinctive gentleness. She crouched down near their table, lowering herself so her eyes were level with Lily's. Then her hands began to move. Slow, gentle, graceful, American Sign Language, flowing like a dance. Her eyes stayed locked with Lily's, not demanding, not forcing, only offering a quiet invitation. "Hello, how are you? What's your teddy's name?" Daniel froze. Jason froze. The entire cafe seemed to still for a moment, and then the impossible happened. Lily's lips did not move, but her eyes flickered. A light returned to them, faint but real. And then her mouth curled into the smallest, shyest smile. The first true smile Daniel had seen in over a year. His breath caught. His chest ached. He could not move, afraid that even the smallest sound might shatter this fragile miracle. The waitress kept signing patiently, coaxing Lily like a gentle guide leading someone back from the shadows. And then, Lily lifted her small hands, clumsy but determined, and copied a few signs. Not perfect, not graceful, but unmistakable. Jason whispered, "Who is she?" Daniel could not answer. His throat was too tight. All he knew was that for the first time since the accident, his daughter had reached out, not to him, not to a therapist, but to this stranger with kind eyes and moving hands. In that moment, something stirred in him. For Thacker's, the first time in months, he dared give it a name. Hope. The Cafe Encounter. The world inside Pine Cafe seemed to bend around that single moment, when Lily lifted her hands and tried to mimic the graceful movements of the waitress. For Daniel, time slowed to a crawl. He sat frozen, his eyes locked on his daughter as though he might miss the miracle if he blinked. Jason had fallen silent, his usual confident voice gone, replaced with wide-eyed disbelief. The hum of the espresso machine, the soft chatter of customers, even the drizzle tapping against the windows, all of it faded into the background. Only Lily and the young woman with the warm eyes existed in that instant. The woman smiled gently, her hands continuing their slow dance. She made each movement deliberate, clear, patient, as though she had all the time in the world to wait for Lily's response. Daniel realized she was not simply signing words. She was communicating presence. Every tilt of her head, every pause of her hands carried reassurance. I see you, I hear you, even without sound. You are not invisible. Lily blinked quickly, as though overwhelmed by the sudden recognition, and then she pressed her teddy bear tighter against her chest. But her lips curved faintly again, that fragile smile trying to hold on. Daniel's heart threatened to burst out of his chest. For months he had begged for even the smallest sign that his daughter was still in there, still alive in spirit. And here, within minutes, a stranger had drawn it out of her, not with therapy, not with money, but with quiet understanding. The woman finally glanced up, catching Daniel's stunned expression. She offered a small apologetic smile, then signed a few more words while speaking softly in careful tones, her voice carrying the faint hint of someone who did not hear her own sound clearly. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought maybe I could help. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. He forced himself to nod, though words failed him at first. I'm Daniel, he managed at last, his voice uneven. He gestured toward Lily, who was still staring at the woman as though trying to memorize the shapes of her hands. This is my daughter, Lily. The woman nodded, then touched her chest lightly. Sophia, she said, her lips forming the name slowly. Then, with another graceful sweep of her hands, she spelled it out in sign language for Lily to see. Daniel leaned forward, desperate for answers. How did you know? I mean, how did you understand her? Sophia glanced back at Lily and gave a tiny shrug, her smile never fading. She knows a few basic signs. I think she just signed ha-ha and maybe something about her teddy. Not perfect, but I understood enough. She looked back at Daniel. I was born deaf. Sign language is my first language. Sometimes, even when people only know a little, I can still catch what they mean. Daniel felt his chest tighten again. He had watched therapists, doctors, and specialists try everything, every structured exercise, every expensive technique, and fail. Yet this young woman, wearing a flour-dusted apron, had walked out of a kitchen and in minutes done what none of them could. She had reached his daughter. She had drawn out light where there had only been shadow. Jason leaned closer, whispering out of the corner of his mouth. You seeing this? In 5 minutes, she's done more than those Boston doctors in months. Daniel ignored him. His attention stayed fixed on Sophia, as though she might vanish if he looked away. Thank you, he said quietly, the words raw, sincere. Whatever you just did, thank you. Sophia shook her head gently, dismissing the weight of his gratitude. "I didn't do anything special. I just spoke in the way I know how." And she answered. She looked at Lily again, and her eyes softened even more. "She's special." Lily, as if sensing the compliment, shifted slightly in her chair. Her small fingers twitched against her Teddy's ear, as though she wanted to try signing something else but wasn't sure if she could. Sophia waited, her hands resting in her lap, her body language patient and still. When Lily hesitated too long, Sophia simply smiled again and gave a reassuring nod, as if to say, "It's okay. You don't have to rush." For the first time in months, Daniel felt the atmosphere around his daughter change. It wasn't heavy, strained, or clinical the way it had been in therapy rooms. It was gentle, natural, unforced. His daughter wasn't being treated like a puzzle to be solved. She was simply being seen. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. Jason tried, unsuccessfully, to steer the conversation back to business, but Daniel could hardly listen. He kept stealing glances at Lily, who, though she never spoke, seemed less empty. Her small eyes followed Sophia whenever she walked past with trays of pastries. When she returned, she signed clumsily again, her lips curving into another tiny smile. Daniel memorized that smile with his whole being. He had lived in silence and despair for too long, and this felt like sunlight breaking through after endless storms. When it was finally time to leave, Daniel helped Lily into her coat. As he did, Sophia approached again. She crouched beside Lily one more time and signed a slow goodbye. Lily hesitated, then raised her hand awkwardly to mimic the movement. Her fingers fumbled, but Sophia's smile widened as though Lily had spoken a perfect word. Daniel's eyes burned as he watched them. He wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the miracle he had just witnessed, but all he could manage was a quiet, "Thank you, Sophia." She simply nodded, wiped her hands on her apron, and returned to the kitchen, her presence lingering like warmth, even after she disappeared behind the swinging door. On the drive home, Daniel kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Lily clutched her Teddy as always, but this time there was a faint change in her expression. Not joy, not laughter, but something softer, lighter. And when he poured her a glass of orange juice at dinner and asked, "Want more?" she surprised him. She nodded, a voluntary response, small but real. Daniel's heart clenched. That night, for the first time in months, their apartment felt less like a mausoleum and more like a home. The silence was still there, but it wasn't crushing anymore. It was filled with the echo of what had happened at Pine Cafe. And when Daniel lay awake long after Lily had fallen asleep, he found himself repeating one thought over and over again, the thought he had been too afraid to believe until now. Maybe we're not lost. Maybe we can still find our way back. Lessons beyond words. The next morning dawned gray and wet, as Seattle mornings often did. But Daniel felt something shift inside him when he opened his eyes. For the first time in months, he didn't wake with that crushing weight of despair pressing down on his chest. The image of Lily smiling, however faintly, still lingered in his mind like a fragile candle in the darkness. It was so delicate, he feared breathing too hard might extinguish it, yet it filled him with a hope he hadn't dared feel in over a year. By mid-morning, he found himself pacing near the window, unable to shake the thought of returning to Pine Cafe. Normally, he wouldn't visit the same place twice in a row, but yesterday's encounter hadn't felt ordinary. It had felt like the universe had thrown him a rope while he was drowning, and he wasn't about to let go. "Sweetheart," he said, turning toward Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the rug with her Teddy. "How about we go back to the cafe today?" Her eyes flickered. She hugged her bear tighter, but she did shake her head. For Lily, that silence was not rejection. It was permission. Daniel drove them through slick streets, his grip firm on the steering wheel. He tried not to expect too much, tried not to cling to the idea that one miracle could turn into two, but still, his heart raced as he pushed open the door of Pine Cafe once again, the smell of fresh bread and coffee wrapped around them like a familiar embrace. Sophia appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of muffins, her apron dusted with flour as always. When her eyes fell on Lily, they softened instantly, and that same gentle warmth radiated from her face. She approached, crouching down so she was at eye level once more. Her hands moved in that graceful rhythm, forming the sign for hello, before her lips echoed the word softly. Lily shifted, uncertain, but then her tiny hands lifted hesitantly. She returned the sign, clumsy but recognizable. Daniel's throat tightened. Yesterday's miracle was not gone. It was growing. "Thank you for what you did," Daniel said, stepping forward. His voice cracked slightly from the weight of his gratitude. "I don't usually come back to a place like this 2 days in a row, but yesterday was different. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." Sophia shook her head, brushing off his words with quiet humility. "I didn't do anything," she replied softly. "She was ready. I just gave her a way to say something." Daniel hesitated, then asked the question that had been sitting heavy in his chest all night. "Would you teach her? Please. I know you're not a therapist or a teacher, but you reached her in a way nobody else has. And I think she trusts you." Sophia blinked, clearly surprised. She looked from Daniel to Lily and back again. "I've never taught before," she admitted, her hands moving as she spoke so Lily could follow along. "But if you want, I can try. 1 hour after school each day. No pressure." Daniel felt his lips curve into something he hadn't felt in a long time. A real smile. "No pressure," he repeated. "Just thank you." It was not just Lily who was changing. Daniel found himself changing too. He stopped checking his phone obsessively during lessons. He stopped obsessing over emails and investor updates while sitting at the cafe. Instead, he learned to wait, to watch, to really see. He began practicing some of the signs himself when Sophia wasn't looking, awkwardly fumbling through the movements late at night when Lily was asleep. He had spent his entire life as an engineer, an innovator, a problem solver. When something broke, he fixed it. When something didn't work, he reprogrammed it. But this was different. Healing wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a relationship to be nurtured. And Sophia, with her quiet patience and her steady hands, was teaching him that too. One evening, as the rain fell heavily against the cafe windows and the streets glistened under streetlights, Daniel found himself asking Sophia something that had been tugging at his mind. "Do you ever regret not being able to hear music?" he asked softly, once Lily had stepped away to wash her hands. Sophia paused, her hands resting against her apron. Then she smiled, signing slowly so he could follow, her lips forming the words carefully. "Sometimes. But my grandmother used to say, 'Feel rhythm with your heart. If you listen with your heart, you miss less than people think.'" Daniel stared at her, the weight of those words sinking into him like warmth spreading through a cold room. Listening with your heart. That was what Lily needed. That was what he needed too. And as he walked Lily home that night, her tiny hand in his, Daniel realized something he had not allowed himself to believe in a long time. They were no longer lost in silence. They were learning a new language, one that went deeper than sound, a language of presence, of patience, of love. Healing the millionaire's heart. The weeks that followed woven themselves into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Each afternoon, Daniel and Lily would leave the echoing quiet of the penthouse and walk, or sometimes drive if the weather was harsh, to Pine Cafe. The little red-bricked shop had become more than a coffee house. It was a place of rebirth. The moment they stepped through its doors, Daniel noticed the difference in his daughter. Her small shoulders seemed to lift slightly, her eyes scanning for Sophia with a light that had been absent for far too long. Sophia, in her flour-dusted apron, always welcomed them with the same warm smile. She never made their visits feel like appointments, never carried the stiff energy of a therapist waiting for progress reports. Instead, she made every lesson feel natural, woven into the fabric of daily life. If the cafe was busy, Lily learned while nibbling a croissant at the counter. If it was quiet, Sophia brought her to the kitchen, letting her stir flour or sprinkle sugar while they practiced new signs. Daniel often sat nearby, pretending to work on his laptop, but secretly watching them. He couldn't help it. He was mesmerized by the way Sophia carried herself. She taught not only with her hands, but with her entire presence. When Lily fumbled, Sophia didn't rush her. When Lily hesitated, Sophia waited with patient stillness. And when Lily succeeded, even in the smallest way, Sophia's face lit up in celebration. That warmth, that consistency, was working magic that no clinic or classroom had been able to achieve. Lily began signing more with each passing week. At first, simple words: Teddy, happy, thank you. Then short sentences: I want cupcake, or Daddy sit here. Soon she began expressing feelings she had never dared voice aloud since her mother's death. One evening, her small fingers spelled out, I sad today. Daniel nearly broke down right there, but Sophia simply nodded and signed back, sad okay, sad is not forever. Lily had blinked quickly, as though absorbing the idea that sadness didn't have to be a prison. At home, Daniel's own transformation became clear. He began cooking small meals for Lily instead of ordering takeout. He began putting down his phone when she tapped his arm to sign something. Slowly, the emptiness that had filled their penthouse began to lift, replaced by giggles, clumsy signs, and small rituals of comfort. Lily was no longer a silent ghost haunting their apartment. She was a little girl again, piecing her world back together. Yet challenges still hovered at the edges of this fragile peace. Jason, ever the practical business partner, pulled Daniel aside one morning after a board call. You're slipping, Jason warned. Investors are nervous. You've been absent. Your head isn't in the company anymore. I'm carrying both of us, and I can't do it forever. Daniel rubbed his tired face. He knew Jason wasn't wrong. He had been slipping. But when he looked at Lily waiting by the car, her teddy bear tucked under her arm, he realized he no longer cared about quarterly reports and international deals in the way he once had. For the first time in his life, he saw clearly that wealth and status meant nothing if his daughter was lost to him. Later that day, while Lily practiced new signs with Sophia, learning words for safe, trust, and brave, Daniel sat back and allowed himself to absorb the truth. Healing wasn't about money, power, or fixing problems like equations. It was about presence, about showing up, about choosing love again and again, even when it hurt. And he realized something else. He wasn't only watching his daughter heal, he was healing too. When the cafe closed that evening, Daniel lingered a moment longer than usual. As he helped Sophia stack chairs, he asked softly, "Do you know what you've done? For her? For me?" Sophia tilted her head, smiling faintly, her hands moving gently in reply. "I only gave her a language. The rest was already inside her. And inside you." Her words stayed with him all night, echoing in the silence of his apartment. For the first time since the accident, Daniel allowed himself to believe not only in Lily's recovery, but in his own. A new language of love. The months rolled on, carrying with them the quiet rhythm of new beginnings. What had once been unbearable silence in Daniel's home was slowly replaced with signs, gestures, and laughter. The penthouse no longer felt like a mausoleum where grief lived. It had begun to resemble a place where life pulsed again, fragile but determined. Lily's progress astonished everyone who saw her. Teachers at her school noticed she was paying attention again, raising her hand to sign answers with the help of a small interpreter. At home, she began to tap Daniel's arm, demanding his eyes, so she could tell him how she felt: happy, sad, tired, silly. And though her voice had not yet returned, her silence no longer felt empty. It was filled with meaning, expression, and presence. Yet healing was never a straight path. One afternoon, when Daniel went to pick Lily up from school, he found her sitting alone on the steps, her teddy bear hugged tightly against her chest, her cheeks streaked with tears. His heart nearly stopped. He knelt beside her, signing awkwardly but urgently. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Through trembling hands, Lily signed a broken sentence. "Kids laugh," said, "I broken." No voice. The words cut into Daniel's chest like knives. She had opened herself to the world again, only to be struck by cruelty she did not deserve. Rage flared in him, but he forced himself to take a deep breath, swallowing the urge to storm into the school and shout at whoever had hurt her. Instead, he held her tightly, rocking her in his arms, whispering, "You are not broken. You are stronger than they'll ever know." That evening, they went to Pine Cafe. Lily sat slumped at the little table, refusing to sign, refusing even to look up. Sophia noticed instantly. She wiped her flour-dusted hands and crouched beside Lily, her own face calm but filled with concern. Her hands moved gently. "Talk to me. What happened?" Lily hesitated, her small hands trembling as she repeated the signs. "Kids laugh," said, "I broken." Sophia's expression did not falter. She waited, steady and unshaken, until Lily's tears slowed. Then, with deliberate grace, she signed, "I was told the same. People said I could not cook, could not work, could not live normal. But I learned, being different is not broken. Being different is brave." She placed her hand on Lily's small chest, right over her heart. "This is not broken. This is strong." Lily blinked, watching her intently. Then, after a long silence, her small fingers rose hesitantly and signed back. "Strong? Me?" Sophia smiled, nodding firmly. "Yes, strong, you." Daniel watched as his daughter's tears slowed and her breathing steadied. Something inside her seemed to shift. The cruel words of classmates had left scars, but Sophia's quiet certainty was stronger. That night, Lily practiced new signs at home with unusual determination. She signed strong over and over again, pressing her small fist against her chest until Daniel's eyes burned with pride. Weeks later, an opportunity came that would test everything Lily had learned. Her school held a show-and-tell event where each child was asked to present something to the class. For most children, it meant standing at the front of the room and speaking about a favorite toy or hobby. For Lily, the very thought was terrifying. Daniel considered excusing her from it. He didn't want her to suffer more ridicule. But Sophia shook her head firmly. Let her try. Let her show them her strength. The day of the event, Daniel sat in the back of the classroom, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in a boardroom negotiation. Lily stood at the front, her teddy bear in her arms, her small legs trembling. For a moment she froze, staring at the sea of faces. A few children snickered, already expecting silence. Daniel's stomach clenched. Then Sophia, sitting quietly near the door, lifted her hands and signed slowly, "You are strong. I am here." Lily's eyes found hers. She took a shaky breath, then raised her hands. Slowly, haltingly at first, but then with growing confidence, she signed her story. She told her classmates about her teddy, about her mother in the sky, about how she learned new words with her hands. And though she did not speak a word, the room grew utterly silent, not with ridicule, but with awe. Children who had been ready to laugh leaned forward, mesmerized by the graceful movements of her small hands. When she finished, the teacher clapped. Then the students clapped. A ripple of applause filled the room. Lily's face lit up with a smile so wide, so pure, that Daniel's vision blurred with tears. His little girl had not just participated, she had conquered. On the way home, Lily climbed into the car, her teddy in her lap. She turned to Daniel, her small hands moving with practiced clarity. "I strong, I brave, not broken." Daniel could not speak. He pulled her into his arms, pressing his face into her hair, whispering through tears, "Yes, you are strong. You are braver than anyone I know." That night, as the city lights shimmered beyond the penthouse windows, Daniel sat with Lily asleep beside him and thought about everything that had changed. For months he had believed his wealth, his status, his endless resources could somehow save his daughter. But in the end, what had healed her was not money. It was connection. It was the patience of a young woman who the world often overlooked, yet who carried more strength than anyone he had ever met. And he realized something else. Sophia hadn't just healed Lily. She had healed him too. She had reminded him that listening with the heart was more powerful than any invention, any fortune, any deal. The next afternoon, at Pine Cafe, Daniel found Sophia wiping down the counter after the lunch rush. He approached her, not as a customer, not as a man desperate for help, but as someone whose life had been given back. "Do you know what you've given us?" he asked quietly. "You gave Lily her voice back, even if it's with her hands. And you gave me hope again. I don't know how to ever thank you." Sophia looked at him, her dark eyes calm but shining. She signed slowly, her lips forming the words, "You don't need to thank me. Just keep listening, keep being here for her. That is enough." Daniel nodded, but deep inside he knew it was more than enough. It was everything. From then on, the three of them built their own small world of connection. Each day brought new signs, new laughter, new strength. Lily grew bolder, her hands flying with confidence, her smile returning brighter with each passing week. Daniel found himself looking forward to afternoons at the cafe, not just for his daughter's sake, but because he had grown to cherish Sophia's presence as well. The quiet wisdom in her words, the resilience in her story, the kindness that never wavered. One rainy evening, as they sat at their usual table, Lily signed clumsily but firmly, "Happy, family, forever." Daniel froze, staring at her, his chest tightening with overwhelming emotion. Then he looked at Sophia, who had taught Lily that language of hope, and saw in her gentle smile the same truth he now felt in his heart. They were not broken. They were building something new, a family, a future, a reason to live again. And as the rain continued to fall against the cafe windows, Daniel realized that love, spoken or unspoken, had found them in the most unexpected place.